Joe Burrow is ahead of schedule. The Cincinnati Bengals quarterback shocking the NFL world with a return to practice on Monday.
You are Locked On Bengals, your daily Cincinnati Bengals podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What up, Bengals fans, and welcome to a little bonus episode of the Locked On Bengals podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm Jake Liscow. He is James Rapien, and we've got some good news coming out of Paycor Stadium as Joe Burrow, well ahead of schedule, has returned to practice, albeit in a limited capacity, for the Cincinnati Bengals, and that is a topic of this bonus episode. How Burrow returned to the field so quickly, what his plan is, and what the Bengals need to do before he can return to play, because it won't be this weekend against Pittsburgh for Joe to actually take the field again this year. And James, this is unexpected news, obviously. We're less than 2 months removed from Joe Burrow's surgery to repair that severe turf toe injury. Sounds like he's been running for a few weeks, he said in his press conference after practice. He also mentioned that he's been doing lower body lifting for a while. Feels like this recovery has been relatively straightforward, especially compared to some of his other injuries. Says that he's very confident in his understanding of how to recover from ligament injuries at this point, because he's dealt now with so many throughout his career. But what a jolt it was on Monday. I'm getting up, as I do on the West Coast, having my nice slow morning, and suddenly Joe Burrow is practicing, and I have to jump out of bed, get into gear, and start doing things.
Yeah. Don't strain your toe jumping out of bed, Jake. Look, it's huge news. In the first things first, I want to address this, and maybe I shouldn't. There's been a lot of people that said he shouldn't do this. What about the defense? Oh my goodness, is he going to play defense? All of those things. Look, anytime you can get Joe Burrow on the field or give him a chance to return, you do it. And that was the case a little over a month ago, when they traded for Joe Flacco to try to keep their season alive. That's the case now. And there are a bunch of factors that we can discuss that go into whether or not he is going to return. But early on in this process, they put him on injured reserve on September 16th. Early on that week of his injury, we talked about it. And I said, hey, he plans on coming back this year. Whether or not that happens, I'm just telling you, I had good intel that was the plan. And that's remained the plan. And so to do this, I think my 10,000 foot view reaction now is, all right, well, you have 21 days to save your season, 21 days to show Joe that he should come back. And maybe that only takes 13 days. Maybe that's 12 days where whatever the next it would be 13 days, 13 days. They have 2 games in the next 13 days. And maybe that's the case. And so then you activate him on the 24th, whatever that Monday is, ahead of that Thursday game against the Ravens on Thanksgiving night. Maybe it's that way. Or maybe you go 1-1 and Joe's not completely right. And so you wait until Monday, December 1st. But basically from now until Monday, December 1st, it's up to the Bengals to prove that Joe should come back, to show everyone that Joe Burrow should come back and help it for a maybe a December stretch run, but maybe as early as a Thanksgiving night AFC North primetime showdown. I mean, just boy, oh boy. It's I would not close the door on Thanksgiving one bit. I think that door is pretty open, but the only way that stays open is if the Bengals somehow handle business in a big way this week against Pittsburgh. I think that's the key, is getting to 3-0 in the division, keeping that alive, gaining ground and keeping pace in the North. Even if you lose to the Patriots on the 23rd, as long as you handle business this week, then I do think it's going to give Joe Burrow a realistic chance to come back, because they're going to have something to play for mathematically. And if you give him a 1% chance, he's going to think he can hit that 1%.
And if he's healthy and they're playing meaningful football, the healthy football player is going to play. Now, healthy is a relative term. Joe Burrow talked about that he is going to be tinkering with his footwear for the next couple of weeks to find something that works, which will include some sort of supportive sole to protect the toes from flexion, to try to prevent an aggravation of that injury. It's worth noting that Kyle Purdy in San Francisco was wearing an insert in Brock Purdy. I was thinking Kyle Shanahan. Brock Purdy was wearing an insert in his shoe when he aggravated the turf toe injury. So he went back, had the insert in his shoe, aggravated it. Obviously, very different injuries, right? Non-surgical for Purdy and surgical for Joe Burrow. He's had a distinct and dedicated rehab period that Purdy a little bit different when you're trying to rehab it on the go, but they need to thread that needle, right? Of where is the health and the health of that recovered and surgically repaired ligament, the strength of that surgically repaired ligament. How does he tolerate explosive movements? That's something that he talked about. It's not so much the throwing that's the issue. It's the, okay, if I need to evade a guy in a pocket and explode off that left foot and really shove off of that, the front of my left foot, how does that handle that sort of force? And those are the things that he needs to test over the next couple of weeks. But we have a couple of reasons that we're pointing to Thanksgiving as a potential return. One of them was Jay Glazer tweeting relatively early on Monday after this news broke that Burrow told him last week that he's returning way with 4 Ys sooner than was expected, and gave the timeline of Thanksgiving-ish. And now he's back to practice on a limited basis. There have been rumors going around, James, for at least a month that Thanksgiving was for Joe Burrow, and it was hard to give those too much weight at the time. It's hard to know where those are coming from. But I think it's fair to say this was a surprise to everyone. Like, no one really had the inkling that this was coming today. And to back that up, Vegas typically knows and like prices in stuff like this. And maybe this is just because of the reaction, but the odds shift for the Bengals to win the AFC North, and Mo Egger was on this, at FanDuel went from plus 1,700 this morning to plus 1,100 after that news came out that Joe was returning to practice. Obviously, a lot needs to happen here, and we're going to talk about that. Like, yeah, the defense, that's a huge issue. Yeah, can they close out a game? That's an issue. But I think the unexpected news part of this really gets me, because everyone I talk to about the turf toe recovery, this is ahead of any schedule that was conceivable at the time of that injury, even if he was planning to return this year.
Someone texted me shortly after this news came out and said Joe Burrow is a psychopath. And call it whatever you want, he is. And that's why, like, he talked about it, and shout out to Joe for talking. He talked for over 16 minutes with the media. If you can watch on YouTube, I'm obviously not in Cincinnati, so I wasn't there. That's fine. I consumed it the way Jake Liscow did, and listened to every second of it. And he talked about like the doubt and the mental stuff that goes with it. But I'm so serious. I can't hammer this home enough when I say the week of the injury. And if you go back and listen, the week of the injury, Joe had said, all right, well, I'm going to come back this year. And so even though he's feeling sorry for himself and he was down and he was probably depressed and angry and hurt and mad and all those things, even then he felt that way. And so I'm sure the Jay Glazer thing, why is the relationship there? I don't even think that's an NFL insider relationship. I think they talk about UFC and fighting and like that part of it, just so everyone's aware. I think that's where that comes from. And Joe is a freak, and he wants to come back, and he's going to come back. And I was told early on, like, oh, he's going to come back early, like, because that's just what you expect from Joe. And if he didn't, then that's one thing. But I have a big what if. Obviously, I want to get into the defense a bit more, because there's a lot of people focused on that and all of those things, and hit on the things you just mentioned, Jake. But I have a big what if that I want to run by you, that I sort of ran by Robert Weintraub on what was supposed to be today's show. This emergency episode is going to significantly be our show. But I ran this idea by Robert. I'll run it by you coming up next.
Today's show is brought to you by our friends over there at Peloton. Look, folks, it's time to break through the busiest time of the year with a brand new Peloton cross-training Tread Plus that's powered by Peloton IQ. It's Peloton's most elevated technology and equipment yet that gives you real-time guidance, and it gives you endless ways to move, whether you want to work out by yourself or if you want to work out with your favorite instructor, like my personal favorite, Alex Toussaint. He always gets me fired up to tackle the day. And the thing I like about Peloton, it helps me achieve more in less times. They have features that help you plan, stay motivated, track your progress, and Peloton IQ also provides personalized workout plans and recommendations. That's something that I use right now during the busiest time of the year covering the NFL. They plan my workouts for me based on my mood, my vibe, and also my favorite instructors. So make sure you check it out and use it because it also helps you correct your form in real time and it maximizes your reps. It counts your reps so that you can do it smarter, safer, and more efficient. Let yourself run, lift, flex, push, and go. Explore the new Peloton cross-training Tread Plus at onepeloton.com.
Today's show is also brought to you by FanDuel. FanDuel is America's #1 sports book. And Jake just mentioned it. The AFC North odds shifting a little bit in the Bengals' favor. And whether it's NFL, whether it's NBA and the NBA is back, you got to get in on all the fun with FanDuel, where I got to be honest, especially with NBA, but currently with the Bengals, with the way the past couple of weeks have gone, live betting, well, you got to get in on the fun of all of the live betting because FanDuel has live bets on everything from who's going to score next to fourth quarter comebacks. The Bengals have dealt with a couple of those. Plus, you can even combine your live bets into a same game parlay for an even bigger payout. All you have to do is go to FanDuel.com right now to sign up. FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. That's FanDuel.com to sign up and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, Jake, the what if. What is this show like right now if the Bengals had outscored their opponents 80-76 over the past two games and were 5-4 instead of being outscored 86-80? They're 5-4. They're in first place. They play Pittsburgh on Sunday to get a clear lead over the Steelers in the division. Oh, and by the way, Joe Burrow's practice window, 21-day window has been opened. What is it? Because I danced at the beginning for those watching on YouTube, but short of throwing a parade, I think the dance might have been a bit more intense, a bit more celebratory. It would have changed everything. And I hate looking back, but I can't help but look back because everything would be right there had they just finished the past two games.
Well, so it's the thing that makes the episode with Rob really pertinent here is that they really did squander this golden opportunity in the last two games against the Jets and the Bears. They had no business losing to the Jets, and they almost squeaked out a miracle win against the Bears. Even if they just win one of those games, how different does it feel today in terms of like their margin for error, the possibility that Joe Burrow can get back?
Yep.
The defense will still be the problem that the defense is, regardless of whether they made like one more play or one less play or whatever it is, or maybe the offense manages to make one more play in those games and close those games out, and the defense still does exactly what it does. We would still have those concerns about the defense. We would still be talking about the defense needs to play significantly better for this team to have a realistic shot. And I think that conversation would still exist. But the difference between the margin of error that is now, once again, for the second straight season for the Cincinnati Bengals, entirely non-existent versus the little bit of wiggle room they might have had to find a path through this division. Because Joe Burrow said this during his presser, right, James? Like he's acknowledging that the path to a wild card is difficult. Like the division, you play Pittsburgh, you play Baltimore twice. You play the Browns. They're not really in the division race, but you have multiple AFC North games ahead of you is the point. And if you can win out in the AFC North, and then maybe you beat Miami down the stretch, maybe you beat Arizona down late in December, then you can get enough wins maybe to get there. Really starts with Pittsburgh this week. That's absolutely a big one. You're absolutely right about that. The Patriots at 8-2 are looking like a pretty fierce opponent, although it's worth noting that they haven't had the strongest strength of schedule this year. Part of that is that they're 8-2, but looking like a team that is going to be difficult when they visit Paycor Stadium in 2 weeks. Got to win in the AFC North because, as Joe Burrow said, like that is their path to the playoffs. And once you get to the playoffs, can you find a way to be dangerous? All the questions about the defense persist, obviously, but getting Joe Burrow back is a jolt, no matter what way you cut it. Even if you acknowledge, and we acknowledge how good the offense has been, how many points they've scored, how they've been the most productive offense in the NFL the last few weeks. Getting Joe Burrow back has to make that better. He is, no matter what the people on the social media say and on the internets are saying, James, significantly better at quarterback in football than Joe Flacco for all of the romance and poetry we've waxed about Joe Flacco over the last few weeks.
For sure. No doubt. No doubt. He makes them better. He's relevant. Getting him back matters. This idea that, oh, well, the offense scored so many points, you don't need Joe Burrow because you have Joe Flacco. Like, no, you could have arguably the best player on the planet when healthy, and then have one of the most experienced backups that is clearly capable of putting up huge numbers behind it. That's a hell of a 1-2. That's the 1-2 I want, not half of it. And so, yeah, you can be flawed. And like I said, look at the margin. Look how quickly things change. Look how one injury changed things for the Bengals, who, even though they're flawed in a bunch of ways, I have no doubt would have a winning record had Joe Burrow just never gotten hurt. And the Ravens are saying that today as well. And that's why the Ravens feel like they're going to win the division. And so that's why Joe Burrow, I'll speak for him, he stopped short of it. But of course he's targeting Thanksgiving. Of course he wants to come back. He wants to go to Baltimore, and he wants to beat Baltimore. And then he wants to go to Buffalo and give Buffalo all they can handle on 10-day gap. And then guess what? Welcome Baltimore back in and deliver the knockout blow. Like that. That's what he's thinking. Now, will they even be in position to do that? Who the hell knows? And that's what sucks about the past couple of weeks. That's the significance of the next couple of weeks. But when it comes to like what Joe is thinking, he wants to go there and he wants to kick their ass on Thanksgiving. So whether or not that happens, there's a bunch of factors, including the one of, let's say they win the next two, and then they go there and Joe just plays bad because he's coming off of an injury, and it's going to be really hard. Like, that's going to be really hard to go there, play well, prime time, short week, all of the above.
Yeah, and AFC North road Thursday night game again in Baltimore again.
It's hard. So what I like is that he clearly is like, let's do it. And I'm sure he circled that game 2 months, well, not 2 months ago, because he wasn't even hurt 2 months ago, which is a month ago, and was like, all right, that's realistic. And part of the reason that backs that up is Zach Taylor's pretty non-committal on when Joe would return. He said, we would never reveal a timeline, but this lines up with our timeline. They've clearly had a plan in place, and it was a pretty aggressive plan, and so far they've checked every box. Why wouldn't that continue? Assuming he continues to check every box, I would expect, if they handle their business on the field, and that's where my focus shifts now. I know Joe's going to handle his business. I think he's going to be ready to go for that Thursday night game on November 27th. And maybe I'm getting ahead of my skis and all of those things, fine. But maybe I'm not. And now it's up to the rest of the team, the rest of the coaching staff. Zach Taylor, I'm looking at you. The offensive line, I'm looking at you. The defense, obviously, I'm looking at you. Learn how to held to tackle. You guys better do your job now, because you haven't on defense. And Joe could have thrown you under the bus on Monday, and he did not, by the way. He was like, oh, well, the defense was bad the past couple of weeks, and he didn't say it that way. But the defense has struggled the past couple of weeks, but the offense was bad to start the season, and the defense was playing well. And while that's sort of true, it's really not. Like, the defense has just kind of been bad, and it's just been worse over the past couple of weeks.
And they had those takeaways early against some bad teams, trying to cover it up. Yeah.
So it's Joe is giving you the chance. So take advantage of the opportunity would be how I would put it, which means tackle when it's time to tackle Jake Liscow.
And I just think about the Baltimore Ravens comparison that you brought up. Lamar Jackson comes back. They start winning. I mean, they started winning games, I guess, with Huntley. But one of the big differences,
just one game with Huntley.
Yeah, but then Lamar gets back the next week, right?
Yep.
So they started winning again when Huntley entered, and then they continued winning with Lamar Jackson and the soft schedule that they have and everything. But a big part of that turnaround wasn't just Lamar's return. They've been in relatively close games, or games where Lamar hasn't necessarily played great for the entire game and kind of found his way in the fourth quarter, made the plays in the fourth quarter. A big part of that turnaround, yes, is Lamar Jackson's return, but also is the Ravens figured some things out on defense. And they found ways to patch up holes, and they still have issues on defense. Don't get me wrong, but their results on the defensive side of the ball have been significantly improved. The Bengals will need that if they're going to really be contending. But first things first is find a way to beat the Pittsburgh Steelers, and we'll see what the status of the Mike Tomlin juju is, the 9-8 record that is inevitably coming for the Pittsburgh Steelers, and the way that they've won some games or been in some games lately. But that's where it starts is with Pittsburgh this week and the team without Joe Burrow and with Trey Hendrickson sounding like he's doubtful, according to Zach Taylor on Monday, finding ways to win games, to stay relevant enough for Burrow's return to matter. Because one thing that really stood out to me, James, Burrow kept talking about, we'll see how the next couple of weeks go. And it was the next 2 weeks, which is another tip that he's looking at that Baltimore game to return, that Thursday night game to return. There's numerous tips out there, hints that that's the plan. We'll see how the next couple of weeks go, both in terms of how his toe feels, as he's saying, like testing it with more explosive movements in practice, and see how the team does, because that is going to be part of it. If they lose the next 2 games, there's a very real chance that they just shut it down for Joe Burrow.
Yep. And they should. They should. That's why it's so painful to lose to the stupid Jets, who stink, by the way. Ask Browns fans how they're feeling today after losing to the Jets. They are
Browns fans
ready to fire everybody. Yeah, how embarrassing that is. You know, the Jets have a fire sale at the deadline after beating the brakes off the Bengals in the fourth quarter of a game that you should have coasted to a win. That's the one. Because if you were 4-5, even with that loss to the Bears, you go into this game against the Steelers, you win the game, you're 5-5, tied for the division lead, worst case. You'd be tied for the division lead, but you'd have the tiebreaker over the Steelers for sure. You'd be 3-0 in the division. Everything would be ahead of you. And so you can't blow games. You're going to have to make it up by winning a game or two that you shouldn't win, or you're not supposed to win. Do it. Give Joe Burrow a chance. That's all we've been asking for since week 2, essentially. And so wake up, Bengals. Do it.
We'll see if they do. We will continue to gear up for that contest against the Pittsburgh Steelers later this week. We've got plenty to get to this week, including later in the week, crossover, a preview. We're back to football. James is eventually going to have to go home. Beautiful background there for James Rapien, for those of you.
This is home.
Watching
it's the Ohio River.
YouTube. Beautiful. Why would you ever need to go anywhere else? That's going to do it for this episode, this bonus episode of the Locked On Bengals podcast. Until next time, thanks for listening. Hoo day. Have a good one.